see? Guys, can you see me?
Yep. Yep, we can see it.
Okay. All right. Okay, fine. If something is going wrong, just tell me because I can't see it. Okay, so the slides that I'm going to show are like a mix of my slides and Claude's slides. Claude Sterling, if you don't know, is the chair of the LI-RADS steering committee, and I'm his sidekick. So just a background, the LI-RADS started in 2006, but the official version came out in 2011. And since then, it went through several iterations. Certain things were refined, certain things were added. And in 2017, we had a pretty significant large update, and our original plan as a steering committee was to have another release in about 2019 or 2020. But as you guys know, we had a very unexpected and immediate update in 2018, and it's actually introduced quite substantial changes. And this is just to show you how much we've grown in the past 12 years. So I'm just going to explain to you why 2018 update has happened. And this is the reason why. So this is a paper that came out in Hepatology over the summer, and this is the ASLD practice guidelines on HCC. And the impetus for V2018 release was the ASLD said that they will incorporate LI-RADS into their practice guidelines as long as we're willing to change one of the criteria. And because ASLD is such a huge organization, can you guys hear me? Artie, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Sorry. Okay. Because ASLD is such a huge organization, it's basically the governing body of hepatologists. The opportunity was just too great to pass out. Even though we were all aware that releasing such a quick update was not desirable. So the release was out, and if you can see that in this paper, this is the guidance for United States hepatologists, and you can see that their guidance is based on LI-RADS criteria. There's no more separate ASLD HCC criteria. LI-RADS is now fully integrated into ASLD, and this is another screenshot of their table, again, incorporating LI-RADS 5 criteria as the criteria for HCC. So this is the equivalent of what we have in the LI-RADS document. Again, it is identical to what the hepatologists use. So now the LI-RADS and ASLD are unified, and they use our categories, and the management is completely congruent between the two systems, which is a huge achievement, which is something that, you know, that was the goal of LI-RADS steering committee from the get-go, to have a unified criteria. So in order to achieve this congruent, we had to have several changes introduced. There were two substance changes, and the change that was kind of imposed by ASLD is the fact that they no longer did not want a requirement for ultrasound visibility as part of the criteria, which is something that used to be their requirement previously. They don't want anymore. So from now on, any 10 to 19 millimeter observation which has arterial phase hyperenhancement and washout is categorized LI-RADS 5. Doesn't matter if there's ultrasound or not. And then we've adopted the opt-in definition of threshold growth, which is only limited to 50% size increase within 6 months. Everything else that used to be threshold growth is no longer threshold growth. In order to make things easier and simpler, we've removed the ultrasound and G qualifiers from LI-RADS 5 category, and then there's some minor changes to the core, which are more of clarification issues and additional kind of schematics that we've introduced. So if we look at the threshold growth criteria, this is what the threshold growth criteria used to be. We used to have a 50% or greater increase in 6 months. or more than greater than 100% increase of size greater than 6 months apart, or a new observation greater than 10 millimeters. So in the versions 2017 and below, all of these were considered threshold growth, and all of these were counted as the same. But in 2018, the criteria now is that only 50% or greater increase within 6 months is threshold growth. Everything else is subthreshold growth. So whatever the other two criteria that used to be threshold growth is now subthreshold growth. So any change in size that is less than 50% increase in 6 months is considered subthreshold growth. And the most important change, which is the change to LI-RADS 5 criteria, is really affects the split cell. So I put up the two versions of the table. One is from 2018 core, another from 2017 core. You can see the tables look pretty much the same. The header is slightly different. But the most important change occurred here, which is explanation of how to approach the split cell diagnosis. So previously, most of the lesions in this region, in this cell, would be categorized 4 unless they had ultrasound visibility, in which case they would be concordant with ASLD, with prior ASLD HCC criteria, or if they had 50% diameter increase in 6 months, they were 5G. So again, these are no longer the criteria. So now any lesion that falls into this cell, which is 10 to 19 millimeter, non-rim aphy, and only one additional major feature, is categorized LI-RADS 5, unless the only thing that's the major feature is the enhancing capsule. So let's just take a look at what it looks like. So again, when the lesion's 10 to 19 millimeter observation with non-rim aphy and only one additional feature, if this additional feature is an enhancing capsule, it goes into LI-RADS 4 category. If it's washout, it's LI-RADS 5. If threshold growth, it's LI-RADS 5. Okay, so washout or threshold growth gives you LI-RADS 5, capsule, LI-RADS 4. So just from practice, you can imagine that this affects a substantial proportion of lesions in this cell. So how does that impact categorization? Well, if previously 10 to 19 millimeter lesion with non-rim aphy and non-peripheral washout, again, if it was visible on the screening ultrasound, it would be categorized LI-RADS 5 ultrasound. In all other cases, it went into LI-RADS 4, with one exception. If it also had 50% size increase within 6 months, it would be categorized LI-RADS 5G. So we had three kind of subsets of LI-RADS 5. LI-RADS 5 general, LI-RADS 5 ultrasound, and LI-RADS 5G. In 2018, we don't have any more of this. All these situations become LI-RADS 5. Again, doesn't matter if there's ultrasound visibility or not. If the lesion has non-rim aphy and non-peripheral washout, it goes as LI-RADS 5. If the lesion has non-rim aphy and 50% or greater increase within 6 months, it's LI-RADS 5.
Victoria,
So,
we have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did these changes come about to make them in sync with AAS mostly, or because new data, you know, the threshold growth versus the other types of growth?
Requirement that came from ASLD is the remove ultrasound visibility, which is very odd because they are the ones who were insisting on having ultrasound visibility in the first place. So from my understanding is that there's been a change and shift in how they approach the surveillance, because up to now, ASLD was adamant that surveillance has to be done with ultrasound. But now they recognize that in many cases, ultrasound is not the way to surveil, you know, patients with high risk of HCC. Some of them will have to get CT or more. If we remove the ultrasound requirement, they will just adopt the LI-RADS. The change in threshold growth, they didn't ask for. But it was, since we were releasing the new version anyway, and it would actually make the LI-RADS 5 criteria much more straightforward, right? There's not going to be any more qualifiers of US OG, and because the change in threshold growth criteria would now be also concordant with opt-in criteria. That was the impetus for the change. So we had an opportunity to change, and so this way we simplified the LI-RADS 5 criteria and now concordant with both ASLD and with opt-in. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So just quickly, since there's going to be a lot of schematics, and it's straight from the core, and so you don't have to worry about that. It's all available online. It just basically shows you that, in most cases, this part is actually a substantial proportion of lesions that used to be 4 and now going to be categorized 5. But there's a small proportion of lesions which are now going to be 4s when they used to be 5. For instance, the lesions which previously had, if you remember sorry, come back for a second. If you remember the prior table, you needed just two, you needed arterial face hyperenhancement and at least two other major features to be LI-RADS 5. And again, ASLD no longer has separate criteria. They just refer to LI-RADS. So I just want to touch one last point, is that each LI-RADS category translates into probability of HCC. And again, this graph is in the core and based on the meta-analysis that is in the process of being published. And you can see that each category has its expected percentage of HCC and percentage of overall malignancy. And it's a really nice graph supporting the criteria. And the only problem is that it's based on 2014 and 2017 criteria. So we don't know how 2018 is going to affect these categories and their probability of HCC and malignancy. We expect that there's going to be some slight drop in specificity because now we're kind of making the criteria slightly less stringent, but the sensitivity is probably going to be higher. All right, so just to summarize, the reason B2018 came out is because now LI-RADS is completely and fully integrated with ASLD HCC guidance, which is a huge breakthrough, and will make the LI-RADS a much more uniformly, universally accepted and used system. In order to do that, we had to have two substantive changes. Most important of which is that lesions 10 to 19 millimeters with arterial face hyperenhancement washout are categorized 5 without ultrasound requirement, visibility requirement. And again, threshold growth is only greater than 50% size increase in 6 months. And then keep in mind that the V2018 criteria will still need to be validated to see how they perform. That's all I got for you.